Hello friends. Today let's discuss about Indigenous treaties and the bill, what was actually promised and who added the rest. You have inherited a contract, all of us did, a really old one, and nobody gave us a copy, but we are all on the hook for it. Over the past 300 years, British Crown and then Canada's federal government made a series of promises to Indigenous peoples in exchange for peace, land, and access to resources. Some of those promises were written down and signed. Some were made by elected politicians without asking Canadians directly, and some were ordered by courts. The question for today is, what was actually in the original deal, and how much has been added since then, and by whom? I'm going to break this down by category, so keep it factual and short, and put real dollar figures on the table from a taxpayer's point of view. Let's get into it. So from my point of view, there are three layers of obligation exist in Canada today. Layer 1, what the British Crown actually signed. Layer 2, what the Government of Canada negotiated afterward. And Layer 3, what courts have since ordered or politicians have added, often, and in most cases, without any public vote or referendum. And right now, federal government spends over $37 billion a year across two departments alone, Indigenous Services Canada and Crown Indigenous Relations. To manage this obligation, that works out roughly about $950 per Canadian per year. Let's look at what we are actually paying for. Now let's look at the layer 1, the original British agreements, Peace and Friendship Treaties from 1725 to 1779. These are the oldest treaties in Canada, weren't about land, they were about survival for both sides. Between 1725 and 1779, the British Crown signed the Peace and Friendship Treaties with Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqiyik, I hardly can pronounce it, or Milicet, and related nations in what is now Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Gaspé region of Quebec. Here is a key fact that most people may not know. These treaties did not involve any surrender of land or resources. Indigenous peoples kept their territories. What they agreed to was peace, loyalty to the crown, and a trade relationship. In exchange, Britain recognized their presence and agreed not to disturb their way of life. So, no cash, no annuities, no annual payments. These treaties are still in legal effect today, and since Canada's constitution was patriated in 1982, Section 35 of the Constitution Act protects those original treaty rights, meaning they can be enforced in court, which, as we will see, has happened repeatedly and expensively. Now let's briefly talk about the numbered treaties, the actual land deal that was signed. And so there is a documents you can view from Canadian government's website. Many of them are accessible. Now we get to where the money started flowing, or the consideration began to generate the transactions. After Confederation in 1867, the new Dominion of Canada needed to open the West. The federal government signed 11 numbered treaties, Treaty 1 through Treaty 11, between 1871 and 1921. These covered Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, most of British Columbia's northeast, and large part of the Northwest Territories. In exchange for Indigenous peoples agreeing to share, or in legal term, cede vast tracts of land, the Crown made specific written promises. Here is what was actually signed. Annual annuities, most First Nation under treaties 1 through 8, 10, and 11 received $5 per person per year Treaty 9 pays $4, chiefs receive $25 annually, and councillors receive $15. Reserve lands, specific parcels of land were set aside exclusively for each First Nation. One-time payment, such as farming equipment, tools, seed, were provided at the time of signing. Schools, Canada promised to maintain various schools and reserve. Here is where it gets interesting. Those $5 annuities per year, that's not a type of $5 per person per year. That's the actual deal. The same amount written into the treaty in 1871 unchanged for over 150 years. Today there are more than 600,000 registered First Nation members across numbered treaty areas. The total annual annuity cost to the federal taxpayers is roughly $3 to $4 million a year. It's a rounding error compared to everything else that we'll discuss and the actual cost that you will see. The annuities are almost symbolic at this point. What's not symbolic is everything that has been added on top. Now let's look at the layer 3, the modern treaties, the big money that started flowing after 1975 to present. In 1973, the Supreme Court of Canada issued a landmark decision in the Calder case. For the first time, the court recognized that Aboriginal title, meaning Indigenous right to the land, was a legal reality that hadn't been extinguished in large parts of Canada. That decision opened a door that has never closed. The federal government began a process of negotiating what are now called the modern treaties, or comprehensive land claim agreements. There are now 26 completed modern treaties covering more than 40% of Canada's total landmass. Here are the price tag on the major ones. James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement. Canada's first modern treaty settled as a result of massive hydroelectric project in northern Quebec, included land rights, financial compensation for Cree and Inuit communities, and self-government provisions. Nunavut Land Claims Agreement, the largest Indigenous land claim settlement in Canadian history. Inuit received title to 350,000 square kilometers of land and capital transfer payments of $1.9 billion over 15 years. Nunavut territory was formally created in 1999. Nisga'a's final agreement, British Columbia's first modern treaty. The Nisga'a nations received approximately $196 million in financial transfers, 1,900 square kilometers of land in the Nass River Valley, and critically, constitutionally protected self-government powers. This was the first treaty in Canada to write self-government directly into the agreement. In total, modern treaties have transferred over $3.2 billion in capital, payments, and recognized Indigenous ownership of more than 600 square kilometers of land. And more than 70 Indigenous groups are still in active negotiation right now. Here is the question no politician has put to a referendum: should these new agreements, which go far beyond anything the original British treaties promised, be decided by elected governments alone? Or should Canadians have a direct say? These are important questions. Media hardly even raise it. Politicians always shy about it. Now, beyond the three layers of the treaties themselves, the Canada has built two inter-federal departments, as I mentioned before, to administer its Indigenous obligation. Indigenous Services Canada has a budgetary authorities of $23.2 billion for 2024 and 25. It funds everything from on-reserve education and housing to self-service and children's welfare. Crown Indigenous Relationship and Northern Affairs Canada, the CIRNAC, adds another $14.2 billion handling treaty implementation, land claims, and self-government negotiation. Combined collectively roughly $37 billion a year. 93% of that goes directly to Indigenous communities and programs. Canada has about 39 million to 40 million people. So that's approximately $900 to $1,000 per Canadian per year before you count provincial programs, court settlements, and resource sharing agreements with various companies and government agencies. We will get into all of that in part two because of the complexity and the expensive nature of this discussion. So here's where we are after part one. The original British Crown treaties, the Peace and Friendship Agreement, that cost almost nothing directly. The Numbered Treaties promise $5 a year per person, some land and some schools, modest commitments, signed document, part of the original deal. Then came the courts, then came the politicians, and then came the $37 billion a year. So you can see the progression and how the numbers from $5 it's going to $37 billion. So in part two, we're going to look at the court cases that expanded Indigenous rights beyond anything in the original treaties. The provincial programs and resources, the revenue sharing deals that have grown quietly in the background without any proper and frank disclosure to the public before they were signed and agreed. But the taxpayers are always on the hook afterward. And the question of what Canadians actually know about all of it and what they think they should have a say in it. If you want to understand Canadian policy, follow the money, and on this file, the money is